introduce you guys to Brandon Gador.
Thank you all so much. This is incredible. So Dylan came to my event and he's like, what do I got to do to go after this mission that I'm going after, to inspire people, to motivate people to go after what they want? I said, hey, Dylan, if you listen to me, we're going to do some incredible things together. And he listened to me, and then he had his first event on his 21st birthday. And then, now look at this. He sold out his second event. So, congratulations. So me, Dylan, and Christian have been working on something behind the scenes that, most people would say is impossible. I'm going to tell you 3 stories today about overcoming the impossible and turning that into what is possible. So the first thing that you have to do to be able to do the impossible is you have to voice it out. If people don't know about what you're trying to do, how are they going to help you actually do that? So this guy right here, Jerry Weintraub, this is my idol. This is the guy who changed my perspective on everything in life. So at 26 years old, he was in a dream. He woke up from that dream in the middle of the night. His wife's like, what's going on? He's like, oh, nothing. And then he writes in his little notebook, he said, Jerry Weintraub presents Elvis Presley at Madison Square Garden. 26 years old. And then you can see Elvis right there. So Jerry didn't know how to take Elvis on tour. He's 26 years old. He was having a little success in the entertainment industry. So he did his research and he voiced it out. He's like, who is the best person to talk to take Elvis on tour? And he found out that it was this guy right here, the Colonel. He found out that the Colonel was the guy to talk to take Elvis on tour. So he's like, how can I get his number? How can I get his number? And he gets his number and finds out that the best time to call him is first thing in the morning. So he calls the Colonel. He's like, hey, Colonel, this is Jerry Weintraub. I want to take Elvis on tour. He says, Jerry, Elvis isn't going on tour. And if he was, the hell would he be going on tour with you? So we'll come back to that story in a little bit. John F. Kennedy, 1961, he said, we will take a man to the moon and place him back on Earth by the end of the decade. You heard about this event. When the pandemics happened, I said, I will be the first one to start throwing events in this area. It was one of the hardest times to start having events. So I had to voice it out. I had to role play. I had to role play with my friends. My buddy Rob over there, we've done a lot of role playing. So I had to role play. I had to talk it out. I had to be really, really creative. So I had an event in May of 2021. It was a book signing. We did it at the Beer Garden. And I was like, okay, the creative mind was really useful there. But how am I going to have an inside event that I have to have a structured date and actually get people to pay for ahead of time? I had to voice it out. So I would role play for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. And then eventually it came to my mind. We're going to do an event called Map Your Way to Financial Freedom. So Artie's like, he's like, whoa.
That was your goal, though.
So at my conference in May, I said, hey, I have my Dream 7 interviews of people I want to meet. And I voiced it out. And then the second thing that you have to do is you got to get around action takers, because the action takers help you take the action necessary to be able to make this thing happen, like John Doe and like Dylan did, to allow me to actually be in the same room with Ed Milet for 2 days, like Rob did when he said, hey, do you want to go meet Ed? He's like, we can get a bunch of his books, which me and Rob donated books to everybody here. We'll get them to you later today. And I was like, I got to get around action takers. So I had these Dream 7 interviews up there at my conference, and he was one of them. And shortly after that, I was able to meet him. And then a month later, I was able to spend 2 days in the room while he recorded his TV show. So if you guys watch his TV show, you'll see me in there quite a bit. So back to our guy, Jerry. So Jerry called the Colonel for a year straight, every day, first thing in the morning. Hey, Colonel, I want to take Elvis Presley on tour. He says, you're not taking him on tour. But they eventually became friends over time. And the Colonel calls him back a year later. And he says, He says, hey, Jerry, do you want to take Elvis on tour? He says, yeah, I would love to take Elvis on tour. He said, okay, show up in Las Vegas tomorrow with $1 million. The problem was Jerry was in his mid-20s, and $1 million in 1963 is a lot of money. So he had to figure out how to get $1 million to get Elvis to come on tour. So what does he do? He starts calling friends of friends of friends of friends of friends of friends of family of family of family of family, and yet nothing. He is just striking out so hard until eventually he gets a call back from a guy who owns a radio station. He says, I love Elvis. I would love to help work out a deal to get you that $1 million and get Elvis back on tour. Whew. So what happens? He's got to get the money transferred. And he goes to the bank. They say, why would we transfer you $1 million? We don't believe you. They thought it was fraud. And he had to figure out different ways to make friends with the people there for them to actually believe that he was getting transferred $1 million. And he ended up getting connected with one of the people who worked at the banks there, who actually ended up working for him long term after that. Neil Armstrong right there. You know, a lot of people know he was the first person to make it to the moon, but he got around action takers to be able to make that happen. He was a part of Apollo 11, and there was a lot of Apollos before that. There was a lot of people who tried the simulations and failed, including himself. But he pushed through the challenges, and he got around action takers to be able to make, eventually, what was one of the coolest marks in American history, in world history. All right, so I'm like thinking, map your way to financial freedom. My first personal development event. It's in, when the pandemic's coming back, I'm like trying to figure out, my goal was to get $12,000 for the event. So I was like, okay, if I can get 20 VIP tickets at 200 and 100 or 80 executive tickets at 100, that would give me $12,000. So I'm pushing it for 2 weeks, and I sell like 20 VIP tickets and like probably 2 executive tickets. And I'm meeting with a lady who was a client of mine for about 5-6 years. And she said, Brandon, you know, I love what you're doing. I want to sit down with you and figure out a way where we can help you out for this event. Because at that point, I started to go the sponsorship route because I was trying to figure out how to get this amount of money to pay for the event. I was just trying to break even and get that amount of people in the room. So I ended up switching it to 40 VIPs and 40 executives. And I sat down with this lady, one of the warmest hearts I've ever met in my life. And I'm like telling her my whole vision. I'm voicing it out. And then action taker she was. She was like, Brandon, this is great. It sounds like you got the VIPs under control. Try to sell the executives. Whatever you don't sell, I will pay for the rest, and they will be scholarship tickets. Wow. Boy, that pushed me hard because of that action taker right there. We'll come back to that story in a second. Number 3, the third key to making the impossible happen is you got to persist through the challenges. I tell you what, my heart was beating so much, every time I was having a big event. Probably like Dylan, when you're going to bed at night and your heart's just beating, you're like, oh my gosh, is this going to happen? Is it not going to happen? But, you know, I just knew that guys like Jerry Weintraub persisted through the challenges. So if he persisted through the challenges, maybe I could, and maybe I could do something that I thought was impossible and turn that into possible. So Jerry walks in. The Colonel's at the casino. He's at the casino, he's playing craps, and there's Jerry Weintraub is right there. He's got the $1 million. And he walks up to the room and opens up the door, and Elvis Presley is there. Elvis Presley, the guy himself, is right there. He hands him the $1 million check, and they do a handshake deal to take Elvis Presley on tour. Whoa. Elvis goes, there's two conditions. Number 1, my fans have to be in the front row. I don't want executives that don't know my music sitting in the front row. And then he said, number 2, he said, all the seats have to be filled. If the seats aren't filled, you will not take me on tour anymore. So, oh, okay, no problem. So Jerry books the first tour date in Miami, Florida in July. He's walking out of the plane just soaking wet. And the promoter calls him about a couple weeks before and says, hey, Jerry, ticket sales are off the chart. We got to do a matinee during the day. We got to do a matinee during the day. So for those of you who don't know what that is, it's a show at about probably 2 or 3 before the big show at about 8. So he says, okay, let's do it. So Jerry gets off the plane. He's like sweating. You know, it's summertime in Miami. And the promoter gives him a stack of tickets. And this stack of tickets, Jerry goes, what the heck is this? He says, this is the tickets for the matinee that didn't sell. Jerry goes, what are you talking about? I thought you said ticket sales were off the chart. He says, I know. I told you what I had to make you have this matinee. So Jerry's like trying to figure it out. He's trying to persist through the challenges. Can't figure anything out. So he goes to the colonel. He says, Colonel, I think we have a problem. We have all these tickets that aren't sold for the matinee. The colonel goes, no, Jerry, we don't have a problem. You have a problem. So Jerry's trying to figure it out. Eventually, he convinces the guard at the local jail to let people out of jail to unbolt the seats. They unbolted the seats that weren't sold, put them in the parking lot, put a tarp over them, and then Elvis plays the matinee. Then Elvis plays the show later that night. They get in the car ride after the show. Elvis goes, wow, Jerry, that was incredible. The crowd is just so much more livelier at night. And the rest was history. Jerry Weintraub ended up taking Elvis Presley on tour. He took Frank Sinatra on tour. He produced The Karate Kid, Karate Kid 2. He produced Oceans 11, 12, and he even acted in Oceans 13. And he's the guy I probably look up to the most in the world that is no longer alive. So give it up for Jerry Weintraub. July 21st, 1969. Remember, John F. Kennedy said, by the end of the decade, we will place a man on the moon and they will come back to Earth alive. And Neil Armstrong said,
it's one small step for man,
one giant leap for mankind. They did it. They persisted through the challenges to be able to get to where he was able to step foot on that moon. So I had a touching moment yesterday because there's so many challenges that come with hosting an event, and Dylan can relate. Anyone in here who's ever hosted an event, it's hard. You get told no a lot. You're constantly on the phone. You have to promote for. Dylan listened to me. I said, dude, you have to promote for 12 weeks straight if you want to make this happen. And he's promoted for 12 weeks straight. I was with one of my clients last night, and she goes, wow, this is so cool that you're speaking at an event. Like, whose event is it at? And I was like, you know, it's funny. The event I'm actually speaking at, I've actually been mentoring the guy who's hosting it. And I met him because he was one of the scholarship tickets that you bought back for the last October event. Yeah. Thank you all so much. It's an honor to be able to meet all of you, see many of you again, and thank you so much for letting me be a part of this, Dylan.